I want to welcome you to now number 3 of our political awareness forum. This one's actually entitled, Here Comes the Judge. Let me start by beginning by reading our mission statement. The Political Awareness Forum is designed to educate and motivate our respective communities concerning the political process. Politics, in fact, impacts all facets of daily life, and this forum will be used to provide historical facts and discuss relevant political topics. Our goal is to empower, equip, and disseminate significant information to allow informed decisions when we vote. Now, I'd like to talk about our great team, planning team. On the team is myself, Michael Thomas. We also have Miss Linda Carlton, Mr. Brad Price, Dr. Michelle A. Smith, Pastor John Thompson, Mrs. Angela Williams, Mr. Christopher Williams, Minister Kenny Williamson. For tonight's agenda, we're going to talk about election judges. We're also going to discuss Know Your Ballot. We're also going to talk about voter guides, Protect Your Vote, Stand Up and Be Counted, and also the Census 2020. Next slide, please. To begin, we'll actually propose a trivia question. So with regards to this trivia question, if you could please take the time to answer in the chat box what your actual answer is, and then we will actually give you the answer to this particular question at the end of this presentation. First question up tonight is, which of the 3 branches of government is directly affected by the census count? Is it A, Supreme Court, B, Senate, C, House of Representatives, or D, all of the above? Please select your answer, and I'm going to now turn it over to Christopher Williams, who will do a presentation on election judges.
Hey, good evening, everyone. What I'm going to talk to you about today are election judges. And let me just start off by saying what the role of the election judge is. And they are there to ensure an orderly and fair voting process during an election. Now, to be an election judge, it does not require much of your time. In fact, you just must attend a 1-2-hour in-person training session, and then be able to serve from 5 a.m. to 7 p.m., which is the close of election on election day. It's very, very little as far as what is required of you. The benefits of being an election judge is it sets an example for your family and community at large, and it's a civic responsibility. The best way to protect against voter disenfranchisement is to actively participate in the process. Our system of government does not work if we do not participate fully, and voting is key, but it is not always the end all to everything. History has proven that if we don't participate fully in other ways other than voting, our votes might not get counted. Our votes, there's an opportunity for disenfranchisement to take place. Without enough election judges, the number of voting sites can be diminished, which can lead to long lines and wait times at the sites that are open, which could discourage voters. And also, without enough election judges, the distance to the nearest site might be too great for those without transportation, which may prevent or discourage full participation in our election system. We are responsible for guaranteeing our election system works the way our founders intended. Now, the requirements to be an election judge are listed here, and I'll briefly go through them. You have to be a citizen of the United States, active voter registration on file, and it must be in the county in which you will vote serve. You must cast a ballot in a primary election for the party that you will represent during the election that you serve as a judge. And in Will County, they say that you must speak English. I can't speak other counties. You must attend the election judge class and must not be a candidate for any election. Other requirements include, next slide, please. You must not be an elected precinct You must have the ability to sit or stand for an extended period of time. And an individual commissioned to serve as an election judge is obligated to be available for each election during a 2-year period once you are commissioned. Now, students and our kids have the opportunity to be election judges. And for them, they must simply be a junior or senior in good standing in high school. They must have a GPA of 3.0 on a scale of 4, obtain written approval from their principal, teacher, and parent, and successfully complete the state required training session. And unlike adults, the kids, the juniors and seniors, they must apply for each election that they're going to work in. So they are not obligated to serve for 2 years. Now, you might ask, what about my job? Will I be able to get time off? And Illinois law states that if you give 20 days written notice to your employer, that they have to give you the day off to be an election judge. Now, they don't have to pay you for that time, but at the same time, they cannot penalize you by making you take any accrued or unaccrued time off. And just quickly, I have some information just on voter registration because it seems to be a big problem. And if you're going to vote in person or go to register in person on the day of the election, you have to have 2 forms of ID with you. You have to have your driver's license, and you have to have a bill or a paycheck stub or some type of government document stating your current address. If you don't have a government issued driver's license or state ID, you have to provide your the last 4 digits of your social security number, as well as still have some form of picture ID, and college IDs do count, as well as have that mail with your address, whether it's a paycheck or a bill that's in your name. And there's just a link to take you to the Illinois Board of Election to register to vote, or you can register online, in which case all you need is a driver's license and the expiration and the date that it was issued. And now finally, I have something written by Alexander Hamilton. It's actually from Federalist Paper number 1. And just a brief background on the Federalist Papers. There are a series of 85 essays written after the First Continental Congress met, and they came up with the Articles of Confederation. Hamilton and Madison and others were arguing that the Articles of Confederations were inadequate and gave too much power to the states and not enough power to the central government. And Federalist Paper number 1, he was setting up the stage for the papers to follow. And in this one, his observation, and I'm just going to read this real quick: a dangerous ambition more often lurks behind the specious mask of zeal for the rights of the people than under the forbidden appearance of zeal for the firmness and efficiency of government. History will teach us that the former has found a much more certain road to the introduction of despotism than the latter, and that those men who have overturned the liberties of republics, the greatest number, have begun their career paying an obsequious court to the people, commencing demagogues and ending tyrants. And so what Hamilton was observing there was just the leaders that seem to court and speak out for people's rights, your right to carry a gun, your right to not to wear a mask, lead to demagogues and tyrants more often than people who are in favor of a firm government, a government that will set rules and regulations. And just during the times, it struck me as I was reading it as something that we should all pay attention to and understand and see if we can see what Hamilton was saying is taking place here at this time. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Mike.
Chris, thank you very much for that great presentation there. Now, as a segue leading into our second presenter, I'd like to go over another trivia question. The question is, what is the purpose of the 25th Amendment in the United States Constitution? And remember, please select your answer by actually answering it in the chat box there. First answer is promote freedom of speech. B, bolster the Civil Rights Act. C, reinforce the Jim Crow laws. Or D, the succession of the presidency. Please choose your choice. And next up, we now have Dr. Michelet talking about what's on the ballot.
Thank you, Deacon Michael. Good evening, everybody, and thanks again for your time today as we become informed voters. And one way to do that is to take a look to see what's on your ballot. You see here on the screen, you can go to ballotpedia.org, and if you go to the left-hand box, you'll see something that says, see my ballot or show my ballot. You can enter your address information and get a view of what will be on your ballot. So you have a sense of what candidates are running for office, if there are any special election items, if there are any referendum. For example, on my ballot for where I live, it says Illinois allow for graduated income tax amendment. That actual item on my ballot is in reference to what you may have seen as the Fair Tax Illinois or Illinois Fair Tax, the commercials that are going around about the new item on the Illinois ballot. Notice it doesn't show up on my ballot the way it shows up on the television commercial. So the value of taking a look at my ballot is I can be an informed voter and I can become an educated voter. So before I even show up at the poll or before my mail-in ballot arrives at my home, I get a sense of what's actually on the ballot. Who are the people running for office? And it gives me a chance to do a little research to see what they stand for. It often will give me links to the candidate websites so I can go and read what it is they say they believe in. And if I'm old school and I really want to go vote in person, I have no intention of using the absentee or mail-in ballot, I can print out the little ballot from the screen, kind of do my homework in advance, and then when I show up at the poll, I can be ready to work from there. Keep in mind, this is not your mail-in ballot. You may not take your mail-in ballot to the poll and go vote again because you only can vote once. But if you are going to be a in-person voter and you want to do your homework in advance, this is one strategy. The other thing about this is understanding what's on your ballot allows you to really take a look at what's down the ballot. You'll remember our first political awareness forum, we talked about down ballot voting. So it's important to take a look at county commissioners or if there are circuit court judges or county assessors, some of the people that actually impact your life much more than the president of the United States, but these are important for you to be aware of. Regina King won an Emmy and she mentioned about voting on television last night, and she said, vote up the ballot. And that's a really important point for us. We think about the presidential elections because yes, they are important, but what's really closest to us is what's closest to home. They say all politics are local, and indeed they are. So we really want to encourage you to take a look at your ballot in advance. Let's say you're not sure who's on that ballot or what that means. You looked at it. There are places you can go, and here are several websites. These are nonpartisan organizations that will give you a chance to do that research. So Know Your Vote, headcount.org, the Black Women Roundtable, League of Women Voters. These are just a few. But again, you can go to these sites. You can also pull up a sample ballot with headcount.org. You can actually sort by what matters to you. So let's say you're not familiar with the candidates, but you know what issues matter to you. You can sort by the issues and find out which candidates align with you and your values. You can also, because these are nonpartisan sites, get a sense of what the candidates really stand for. Sometimes when you go to their website, they're going to paint the best picture of themselves. Well, these sites can give you a little bit more detail about who they are and what they stand for. These sites will also tell you the source of their data. And I assure you, it will not be Facebook or Instagram, but it will be reliable, reputable sources. And that's important as well. So the information you're receiving really is something you can rely upon and not something with too much of a slant. You also can have voter guides for any judicial opportunities. So if you have those circuit court judges on your ballot, you can check out any of the bar associations. It's important. I was in a webinar a few weeks ago and I learned that when judges are first on the ballot, that is the only time they have to declare their party affiliation. After that, they often show up on the ballot listed as nonpartisan, even though they may have a particular leaning. So these sites allow you to do a little bit of research on those judges. You can see a detailed explanation of any judge that's running. It's kind of a bio of sorts. So you'll often see when did they get appointed as a judge, when did they qualify in the role that they were in. You can see when they were admitted to the bar, and often it gives you kind of a summary of who they are and what they stand for, and sometimes what some of their voting records have been in the past. Sometimes the county and judicial circuit court judges will only show up on the ballot as yes, you want to retain that judge, or no, you don't want to retain that judge. And if you don't know enough about that judge, it can sometimes be difficult to make that decision. Again, as an informed voter, by going to some of these voter guides in advance, this really gives you a chance to see who you're casting your vote for. We want to remind you to protect your vote. I'm going to start with the mail-in voting first, which again, if you recall our first political awareness forum, mail-in voting, absentee voting, same thing. When you get those ballots, and they will begin being mailed out this Thursday, September 24th, you want to make sure that you use the envelope that it came in to send it back. So be careful, don't spill coffee on it and try to use a different envelope. That's going to be a problem. You want to insert that ballot all the way into the envelope, seal it. And what's really important is you want to make sure that you sign and date the envelope. And this may seem like a little minutia, but you must use black ink. What we are being told is that some of the machines can't read varying colors of ink. So just to be sure your vote is safe, black ink and your formal legal signature, not the one you use when you're signing the credit card slip really quickly in the restaurant. So be mindful of this. Voting is a sacred right for all of us as citizens. So just be really careful of what you're doing with that absentee mail-in vote. Remember, if you applied for your mail-in ballot, as of September 15th, by law, Illinois was required to send you a reminder if you had not taken action on that. So if you're somebody who applied, but you didn't do anything yet, you probably received a reminder saying, don't forget to cast your mail-in, request your mail-in ballot if you so choose to do that. And then in terms of in-person, again, if you really want to go to the polls, if that is something that's important to you, just keep in mind when you're there, you want to follow the rules about those ballots. If it's a paper ballot or even in the machines and it's asking you to fill in the oval, you want to follow the rules. Don't make a check or X mark. Don't get fancy. Follow the rules totally clearly so that there won't be any issues. Also, if you're doing a paper ballot, you don't want to change your vote once you've filled in the oval. It's important that you really are thorough about what it is you want to do. And then we just want to remind you to stand up and be counted. That census is coming. It was in our Journey newsletter this week as a reminder, in addition to other times. The last time to respond to the census is next week, the people, September 30th. And it is important that we all stand up and be counted. The census makes a difference. So for example, in the state of Illinois, we are a state of about 12.8 million in terms of population. About 2 million are African-American, identifies African-American or Black. Another 2.5 identifies as Hispanic or Latino. And in the last census, the undercounts were in the 70,000 range for each of those groups, leading to about $300 million in under resource funding. So when we don't cast our census, we end up losing resources. And that can mean services to your community. That can mean losing a congressperson in DC. And it also could mean that the state of Illinois could lose an electoral college vote. And we'll be talking about the electoral college and its significance in a future session. But we want you to know that this census really matters. So please, my2020census.gov, go there and make sure you do not miss that deadline. It is a month earlier than it has been in the past. So we just don't want you to miss out. And You will hear us repeating some things. Vote.org, check that voter registration, apply for that vote by mail ballot, and tell others to do the same. The reason we really want to push this is the earlier you vote, the better. You only get to vote once, and you just don't know what will be happening come November 3rd. We really want you to think about voting as a season and not an incident in time. And voting season begins with this Thursday, September 24th, when some early voting begins and mail-in absentee ballots are being mailed out. So get out there. The sooner you can cast your vote, exercise your right as a citizen, the better. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Deacon Michael.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nicola. Great presentation. Great presentations we had. All right, folks, want to actually give you the answers to the trivia questions. For the first question, which of the three branches of government is directly affected by the census count? If you answered C, House of Representatives, you are actually correct. Remember, that's based upon the projections of the population growth. Northeastern and Midwestern states such as Pennsylvania, New York, Rhode Island, Ohio, Michigan, Illinois, and Minnesota may lose seats, while Western and Southern states such as Oregon, Arizona, Colorado, Texas, Florida, North Carolina, and Virginia may gain seats. Next slide, please. Second trivia question was, what was the purpose of the 25th Amendment and the U.S. Constitution? If you answered D, the succession of the presidency, you are correct. As far as that's concerned, it's the first person in line is actually the president. The next in line for sequence of succession is the vice president, then followed up by the Speaker of the House. Next slide, please. For our key takeaways for the presentations for tonight, we talked about election judges. We also talked about checking out your ballot online, protecting your vote, standing up and being counted. We also talked about the census, which ends September 30th. And we also talked about voting early. But one other caveat I want to add about voting early and even about voting. Remember, you only vote one time. Because in some states, in each state's laws are actually different as far as voting. It can actually be considered to be a felony charge if you actually vote more than one time. So at this time, I'd like to actually turn it over to Angela Williams in regards to any questions and answers that actually may be out there.
So again, if you'd like to take the opportunity to enter a question into the chat, please feel free to do so. Or if you have a question and you would like to unmute your line, please go ahead. Right now, we only have one question in the chat, and it reads, what if I have a mail-in ballot, but then decide to vote in person? The answer to that is you will need to take your mail-in ballot with you to the polling place and surrender it. If you cannot locate your mail-in ballot, while you will be allowed to cast your ballot, it will be considered provisional and counted only after it can be confirmed that you did not vote twice. As we talked about last week, you want to avoid provisional ballots at all costs because there is no guarantee that your vote will be counted. Okay, a few questions are coming in. How can I be assured my vote will be counted? I'll let Christopher handle that since from an election judge standpoint.
Well, if you're talking about your absentee ballot, you can follow your absentee ballot online and you'll see when it's received at the Board of Election. If you go to vote in person, as long as the election judges do everything that they're supposed to do, you do what you're supposed to, you're registered. If you're not registered, you take in the proper ID, your vote will be counted. It's just that simple.
Okay. Is there a website that I can visit to get more information on the fair tax law? Again, I believe we put that in the chat earlier. Dr. Michelet, do you want to again give that website address where you talked about being able to find additional information as it relates to Illinois in your specific county?
So there are several websites you can go to, but if you do ballotpedia.org, it will not only show you the sample ballot, but you can also, once you're there, take links to the items that are on your ballot. So when I went to my ballot and I saw the piece for the Illinois fair tax, I can click on that and then read more about that tax. And it tells me what it means if I vote yes, what it means if I vote no.
Okay.
So ballotpedia.org is a good place to start.
I put it in the chat, but I just entered it again for everyone to be able to see it. And it appears our last question, is voting fraud really a concern? And I'll let both of you kind of give a perspective on that.
Well, from my perspective, I don't see voter fraud being an issue. Based on what I've learned from my classes at the election, going through the election judge class, and just what I've been reading, it's very, very, very difficult for someone to intentionally commit voter fraud. It is extremely difficult for it to be done on a mass scale. Once you go in to cast your ballot, the election judges have ways of seeing who's actually registered to vote in the community, making sure that you are at the correct precinct. They can see if you've gotten a absentee ballot. They can even see if that absentee ballot has been received by the Board of Elections. And so it is extremely difficult to cast two votes in an election.
Yeah, I would just concur with what it's Michelle. I would concur with what Christopher is saying. I've also participated in 3 other webinar groups similar to what we're doing here about becoming informed voters, and that is the sentiment widespread. That the voter fraud is not a widespread issue, but voter apathy is. So make sure you vote. Take your family and friends. It is important that we cast our votes. That's the key.
Questions are coming in. Will the polling locations be safe? I think, again, Dr. Michelet spoke to it. We don't know what November is going to bring as far as where we are with the virus. We can tell right now people's passions are oftentimes getting the best of them. So with that being said, depending on how you are defining safe, if you have an opportunity to request a mail-in ballot, that might be the safest thing to do. And as soon as you get it, cast your vote and send it back to make sure that it gets in there on time. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Christopher and Dr. Michelet to again give their perspective.
The question is safe from people, not the virus. As far as I know, they're not going to be putting in any extra precautions, for this election. But the sheriff deputies and the local police agencies are going to be aware, and the election judges will have the ability to call and get help at facilities if it's required. I don't personally see it being an issue, but I can understand the concern.
Again, to play it safe, go ahead and request that mail-in ballot, and then go ahead and mail it back. But again, as Dr. Michelet had said, if you feel very passionate about wanting to go vote in person, you would just need to surrender that mail-in ballot at your polling place. So to Christopher's earlier point, they can confirm that you are not attempting to vote twice. If you surrender your ballot, you will be allowed to cast your ballot right then and there, and it will be counted. It will not be considered a provisional ballot.
And I would just like to say one thing about provisional ballots. They will count if everything is legal. And what happens during the provisional count is everything is under a lot more scrutiny. During the provisional count, you have legal representatives from both parties there to ensure the count is right. You have the state's attorney there. You have sheriff deputies there. And so there's extra scrutiny. And so if anything is not in line with the law, they will throw your ballot out. They will. If the signature doesn't look right, it's a judgment call, they can throw your ballot out. Now, if you make sure that you vote and your vote isn't provisional, you're not going to have that type of scrutiny there, not at all. And so that's why it's really important to make sure that we are registered, that we surrender our absentee ballots so that we don't risk being put into that provisional ballot count category. If you remember what happened in Florida with the hanging chads, ended up being a recount. And during that recount, you had parties from both sides just arguing over things that you think, oh, well, the punch card is punched through, but it's hanging there. So is that a real vote? Well, in my head, it's a real vote. But legally, they lost that argument. The hanging chad. So I would just say, let's make sure that we don't fall in the category of a provisional ballot.
I have a question. If you hand deliver your vote to your election board, is it considered a provisional vote? How is that handled?
If you have a mail-in ballot and you drop it off at one of the drop boxes, the official drop boxes, that is not
what if
considered.
I go to the election board itself and hand deliver it to the election board?
I don't know if they're going to be taking them like that.
I know they do in North Carolina. They told me that I can. They accept them. You can up until November 3rd. I just didn't know if it's counted as provisional or not.
No, well, here in Illinois, it wouldn't be provisional. I just don't know if they're allowing people in during COVID just to drop off their ballots at a counter as opposed to a drop box.
We don't have drop boxes in North Carolina, so that's probably why we don't have drop boxes.
So Pam, there is Mr. Lay. They're probably, so this is where, again, go on the website, see what your county says, because they will publish those details. They often have frequently asked questions. And as Christopher said, here in Illinois, they're not typically having people drop them off, but you can take your mail-in ballot to the post office and go and have it stamped and get a receipt to show that it's going to go get sent in. So different states, different counties, you really want to do the research to see what makes sense in your area. I also want to just quickly go back. I know that the original question was about the locations being safe from people, not the virus. But for anybody who is worried about the virus, I do want you to know that the polling locations are taking all of the safety precautions as well, which is the other reason that there's an anticipation that lines and wait times may be long if you vote in person, which is the other reason why mailing in your vote or taking care of that absentee ballot might be better for you if the idea of standing in line for multiple hours is concerned. But often those lines will probably be due to if you don't have enough election judges, or more likely because of the safety precautions that we're putting in place to keep everybody safe during the voting season.
Okay, I believe the last question. Will a copy of the questions and information captured in this chat be available in the information that will be provided as a reference? And I'm going to say yes. We typically do a job of capturing all of the questions that are in the chat, and then we will make sure that the responses that have been given or provided this evening are associated with those questions. Any additional questions before I turn it over to Pastor Mike?
I just want to say real quick that the Will County Clerk's Office has released all of the early voting times, and that location is the Will County Clerk's Office. So they've released all of the dates and times for the early voting that's going to take place there.
Okay. Mr. Mike, we'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you much. We're now coming to the conclusion of number 3 as far as our political awareness forum. We want to thank you all for your participation. And we want to make sure that we don't just make it about harvest people. We want to make it about all people, because in these the great dynamic speakers we actually heard tonight, we're going to continue to do this. We have 3 more sessions. The next time we're actually scheduled would be for Tuesday, October 6th of 2020. And we'll be discussing those topics that will actually be coming up. But far as voting, I'm going to reiterate it. We're going to sound like a broken record. vote, vote, and vote. We are nonpartisan here. We're actually here to motivate you, to stimulate you to get out there. And considering this political climate, we need you to have all hands on board. That means if you have friends, text them. Let them know, hey, are you voting? You really want to try to reach out to the folks you know that didn't vote in 2016, because right now, I'm telling you, we're going to have to get out there and get boots on the ground. This is a very important election we're actually dealing with. We also want to motivate the younger folks. We've told you about rockthevote.org. We need to tell them to get off their behinds and get involved, because this is going to affect them down the road. Also, wanted to state that early voting starts in September, on September 24th, basically 2 days from now. And you need to look at your county website. So if you're in Will County, Kendall County, look at all of them, because they'll actually point out the different locales where you can actually do early voting if you choose to do so. Another thing I'd like to also state is that we really need your support once again to close out. And we thank you for your participation, but spread the word. Thank you very much. Have a great evening, and we appreciate you for joining us and look forward to you to the next time. Thank you much.